We're talking about Bitcoin and astrological charts of cryptocurrencies today. Basically about the origin of Bitcoin first. And Swamiji, he has actually been working in consulting and engineering and management before, in his life before he became a Swami. And he has 2 degrees, I think, in engineering and 2 degrees in business. And has been involved in engineering on a network level quite early on, I think in the 80s or so.
In the mid-80s, that's right.
What did you do there?
So basically I was considered one of the 75 experts in data communication. What I particularly worked on was the open systems interconnection, which had a 7-layer model. And my expertise was basically with file transfer and management protocol. It was a really highly sophisticated system, but then the internet subserved the whole technology, so I'm not sure it's being used anymore. In the meantime, I just moved on to study business and management degrees.
So that's basically was kind of a predecessor of the internet. It was not DARPANET.
No, it was a lower layer. Like internet and DARPANET, they were on the 3rd layer. And this was sort of a more, basically data communication was structured into 7 layers.
Okay.
And so internet and DARPANET were basically on the 2nd layer, on the 3rd layer. And I was actually working on the 7th layer. But that model, I don't think it's being used anymore. It was rather sophisticated and quite advanced.
Sounds almost esoteric, 7 layers.
It is, yes, yeah. There was
layers.
probably some connection with that. 7 colors of light and 7 layers of, we see 7 layers of a lot of things.
Of communication also. Because there's, I think, talk also about some scriptures that they have 7 layers of meaning.
Exactly, yeah.
That's
yeah.
quite interesting.
There's 7 layers of existence in terms of esoteric, or in terms of spiritual matters is something very significant.
Yeah. So you have degrees in engineering. What was it? Electronics?
So I've got first 2 degrees. These are formal degrees, of course. I have a degree, a Bachelor of Science in computer engineering, and then the other one is in electronic engineering. So it's both hardware and software.
Yeah.
So I did that for my bachelor's, and then went on to get management degrees in international business, in fact from one of the best business schools in the world called Thunderbird. And there I've gotten Masters in International Management, and then also a global MBA.
And then you went through development aid, and I cut it a bit shorter. And ended up in, I think, with Greek astrology first somehow.
Yes.
Being very scientific, but somehow you ended up looking into astrology, which is quite strange.
Well, it isn't strange. What happened was, I did all the right things like everybody else, and we all pursued the normal dreams of, basically at that time I was following the American dream, which was basically get your degree, get a good job, and get a nice house with white picket fences, and get married and have kids, but never got to that part. What happened is right during that time life intervened, and I went through a lot of personal struggles, and then I wanted to find the meaning of life, which could only be explained, my challenges could only be explained by astrology, and so I became a little curious about it, and luckily I was fortunate to stumble on Hellenistic astrology, which was something not many people were familiar with.
Okay.
And there were 2 things actually. It's one of those things like you're rebellious of your own tradition, so I was rebellious of my Indian roots and Indian tradition, and I upheld the Greek tradition because it was the root of Western civilization, which I upheld quite highly in my point of view at that time, and so I went into Greek astrology and not Indian astrology.
Yeah, I think you were upheld by Greek tradition also because the Greeks they were quite well known in India as the kind of first crusaders who came there before the Muslims, even under Alexander. They have a bad connotation in India in general. And Javanas, I think, is still used for white people or Europeans.
That's right,
So
well, they were the invaders. I mean, the white people were the invaders, and so were the Moguls.
Yeah. So then basically you moved on, you found that something is not right with Greek astrology, and you moved on to Vedic astrology. And,
Well, it was what happened is the more and more I began to hear and learn about Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and the Greeks, I began to realize that what they were talking about actually came from India. And because of my previous understanding of India, I began to see the roots or the connection between the ancient Greeks and the Indians. And then I wanted to get to the source of information. So inevitably, or you could call fate, kind of led me into the Vedic tradition. The Vedic tradition is an ancient Indian body of knowledge that carries a tremendous wisdom of our existence today, or at least it explains.
Yeah, I think there's quite a kind of official knowledge about the syncretism between Greek philosophy and Egypt and also Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
I think that's well established. But the Egyptian astrology, we know that it existed because we have this circle of this zodiac of Dendera, I think. So definitely they had some sort of knowledge about astrology, very obviously, and also the Sumerians and Mesopotamians. But I think we can see that if one looks a bit closer, that a lot of knowledge came from India actually, and there's a lot of trade even before Alexander, I believe.
Yeah. Actually, the Hellenistic astrology, which is really sophisticated compared to modern astrology, you find that they were written by Arabian authors. So the Hellenistic astrology was actually Egyptian, written in Hellenistic language. So it's like today, for instance, we write in English, we write about Indian astrology in English. So 2,000 years from now, people can say, well, it was English astrology, which wasn't quite the same. So yes, and then we found out that the roots of the Egyptian astrology actually came from Mesopotamia and Sumeria. And they had trade with India, which was actually evidenced in a documentary by National Geographic, that there was this transactions going on maybe 3,000 to 4,000 years before Christ.
Yeah, I mean
So it's quite fascinating to see how the knowledge of astrology kind of spread westward.
Yeah. Anyways, we wanted to talk about Bitcoin and the astrological background of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and that will be just the first session of many to come. So the first thing we did is determine the birth time of Bitcoin. It's fairly easy because you basically take the first mined block. I mean, the writing of Satoshi's white paper is the conception of Bitcoin, is not the birth. And so since you talk a lot about the appearance, the first appearance in the physical realm, it's definitely the first mined block. And we have the exact time for that. It's January 5th, I think, 2009 or 3rd. And we have a specific time, even exact to the second. It's like, what we don't have clearly is the location. So there is the majority seems to agree that the computer that mined the first block is in Dublin or London, which is the same time zone almost. Another two options would be New York or Tokyo. So we explore that, and we can. The nice thing about Vedic astrology is that you can, even better than in Western astrology, really verify the birth date by looking at past events and then comparing with the chart if that matches or not. So since I think New York, Dublin, and Tokyo are quite far apart, we should be able to verify that easily.
It would be interesting if your listeners had. Can provide some more input about this if they know. But basically, from what we have found is that Dublin and London really makes no difference in terms of its location, but the more accuracy we have, the better predictions we can make in terms of where Bitcoin is going in the future. But right now we're using Dublin, which seems to work. And the time we're using is basically January 3rd, 2009 at 6:15 p.m. But no, whether that is accurate or not, it would be great to verify it if people know exactly where that came from. So
that's the nice thing about Bitcoin. You have like in the beginning you had very few exchanges, like you had
Right.
Mt. Gox in the beginning, which dominated 70% of the Bitcoin trade. So you have the prices and are also very defined. You have very steep rises. You have
right.
like tops that are lasting for a very short time only, and then you have strong drops. So I think there are enough indicators to really
That's right.
get a good pattern out of it.
Yeah.
Really.
And in fact, I think if if your listeners are interested, we can do a whole case study on.
Yeah, it's your listeners actually.
Oh, my listeners, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or if people are interested, then I'd be happy to look at Mt. Gox and see how that correlated to astrology as a case study is something that I'm interested in doing, and I'll probably do it in another session, upcoming session in the future.
So what we'll do is basically we look at Bitcoin because it's in the first place because it's like past pro toto, standing for the cryptocurrencies, and it's still dominating the market volume, and it's a leader also in many regards when it comes to trading because it leads the pack and most of the altcoins just follow Bitcoin. So that's for sure that Bitcoin is quite important, and it so we look at prices, of course we look at different altcoins, Litecoin, Ethereum. In the future we look at forks maybe, because Bitcoin had a couple of forks since August 1st, 2017. We have Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Diamond now, and a couple of other ones that I forgot. So everything that's kind of labeled Bitcoin plus something, we might consider that as children of Bitcoin maybe, because they're
exactly
offsprings.
They're offsprings.
So maybe they show up in we can also use them as dates in the past to.
That's right.
I forgot to think about that, to use that to verify the location.
Exactly, you have to look.
And maybe look at the charts of these children also, see what happens with them.
Yeah.
And I would really love to be able to treat Bitcoin or the cryptos as a person, maybe like a living person.
Yeah, we can. We can. I mean, we can definitely look at it as a person. I mean, the way I would look at it is, I was thinking of correlating Bitcoin, if we describe it as a human being, as this very electrifying, absolutely gorgeous woman. But then, the more I looked at it, as we usually do, it's like the first illusion is that, and then the more closer we examine, I begin to find out that she's more
androgynous.
I can't say that,
Yeah, okay.
So, but it does have, if we compare it to a person, it would have like a characteristic of being rebellious, sort of electrifying. It's electronic, and it doesn't have authority of its own, and yet at the same time it's nurturing and it's caring. So if you put some human values on it, you see that there is a correlation to what the way Bitcoin came into creation. This is just looking at it from, let's say in astrology we have something called ascendant, which describes the personality of a human being. So if we look at it from astrological point of view, we can say that, okay, if I was to describe this person, from an astrological point of view, and not say that this is an event, so to speak, then this is how I would describe this person.
Another thing, of course, that really interests people is the price development and the volume also, and the presence of Bitcoin in the future, and that's where we eventually want to get. So it's not just a hobby. Can you already say something about that? And now was in a
down slump.
And in a retracement. Are we finished already?
Well, just to give you a backtrack of it, using Vedic astrology to look at the movements of Bitcoin. I mean, basically, since it started in 2009, it did sort of have a lot of ups and downs. But what really shifted was last year. 2017. And that is really evident in Vedic astrology, that shift, which is really important because it went from just barely hanging in there. They're just more like an eclectic group, or more sort of like the under rebellious group that kind of got into investing into Bitcoin. And mostly they did it to sort of like rebel against the banking industry, which is what got them, which was the motivation for most people to come in. And what's happening really right now is that since last year, that a lot of people who are coming in is not with, they're coming in with a different motivation, and they're coming in mostly to trade. They don't care whether, you know, they're coming in to sort of like rebel against the banking industry. And that is exactly indicative in the chart. So what is also fascinating is that for the next 20 years, we're going to see a really, really intensive involvement by traders specifically in Bitcoin. And we're just at the beginning of it. So you find that Vedic astrology even validates the nature of this particular currency. And right now I'm just looking at Bitcoin using Vedic astrology. So last year it started the real exponential curve, and it's going to continue on that rise. However, like the stock market, it has dips. And right now, this year, and that is also indicative in astrology, starting from January, February, these are the 2 months where Bitcoin is not going to do as well. But then once March rolls around, and we're talking a little bit around March, so March, April, May, June, it's really going to go high again. Whether the Bitcoin is going to do as well as last year, I'm not sure, but it's really going to keep moving up no matter what.
So you said an uptrend starts around the 7th of March or so, I remember?
It will start around maybe early March to mid-March. It depends on the number of events. And what we're going to do is we're going to put up another newsletter where I'll specifically point out the potential rise of the Bitcoin. Right now we're just doing some general forecasting on Bitcoin, but I think later on, subsequent newsletters will put in more details about the highs and lows, and maybe those who subscribe to our newsletter will give you actual specific time frames. I don't want to reveal all the secrets right now.
Of course, And you said there's I think there's an eclipse, a lunar eclipse coming up in.
Right.
Is that affecting Bitcoin?
It will affect because, again, lunar eclipses, it sort of has an impact on global events. And lunar eclipses, there's a full lunar eclipse affecting the western side of California, or the western part of the US, on the 31st of January. So you'll find some world events might actually influence the rise or fall of.
Which we cover another video, I think.
We will cover another video, yeah.
But Minister, can we say there's a major drop coming? Because it looks like if it's continuing the downtrend, what Bitcoin normally does, it drops very fast, or is dropped by the whales, and then they buy up the fear, and then it rises very steeply. So we've seen these V-shaped rallies, and a lot. You see a potential date as a kind of.
We can reveal that later in terms of the specific dates, but basically all of February, most of February is when we'll see downturns really, or it will maintain where we are, but not significant rises. So it's basically, slight rises and lows, but on this level, on what we're talking right now, about $10,000 per Bitcoin. So it might be within that range. If it goes up, it won't go too high up, or if it goes low, it won't go too low.
So it crawls along.
It just crawls along for this whole month of February, and then when we see a real rise is from March onwards.
Okay.
Yeah. So of course, one thing we have to bear in mind is that cryptocurrency is a very new event. Here, we don't have any historical data to show its evidence, and we're just now trying to use the last few years of Bitcoin data to sort of project in the future. So I cannot say with 100% guarantee that this is what's going to happen, But at the same time, we can start experimenting and trying to see how we can see the trends and correlate astrological movements to Bitcoin. So it's again a new experiment, let's say.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, if you look at the stock market, you can make predictions because you have the past events and you can judge certain events, at least for the last 100 years, how they played out. And,
Right.
And you can expect certain things to happen, and Bitcoin is really a wild card. In a sense
is a
that,
wild card, yeah.
you have like government shutdowns, you have exchanges getting hacked and shutting down. I think today was another one that got hacked in Japan.
And actually, this, especially with the World Economic Forum that's being held in Davos right now, I think there'll be a significant effort by banks and Federal Reserves to sort of find a way to, put a brakes on the Bitcoin movement, and so we're going to experience that in February.
But you can definitely say that they will not kill it, no, because you see some 20 years at least of.
No. It's definitely it's not going to. If anything, if it was going to be dead, it would have been dead in the last last 8 years. If there was a potential for what we call in astrology premature death. But in terms of Bitcoin, the way it's appearing right now, it's going to stick around. Okay, now 20, 30 years from now, I'm not sure, but for sure it's going to be around for 20 years at least, and do really well for the next 20 years. After that, it might morph into something else. But in the meantime,
that's already a lot of information because. I mean, most people now know that Bitcoin drops up to, I think we had a drop of 80 or 70% in 2013 or so, and then we had a long slump in 2015 and so on. So we are very used to 30, 40, 60% of price drops, and for people who get into this is very scary in the beginning because 5% dropping of price in the stock market is a big thing. In Bitcoin, it's the kind of bi-monthly routine.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that you really realize that this is going to stick around and be around, that no government has banned it yet and no government will ban it, and banks will refuse to transact with Bitcoiners, and but in the end they always get into the
exactly, and there was all these if you go back in history and you see when paper money was developed, there's a lot of people saying the same thing, because at that time the real currency was gold and heavy metals, but then when paper represented gold, it became it was regarded as paper and fake money, because gold was the actual currency. But because the banks validated it, today paper money has become, the currency rather, and we've forgotten about gold and heavy metals.
It was actually the French king who, before the revolution, validated it because he was bankrupt, and there was a guy named John Law coming along and suggesting paper money, and then it was the king who was bankrupt, of course, who embraced it, and then it was mainly traders, because traders saw quickly that they can make a fortune with it, with paper money, because they were sitting closer to the king, closer to the issuance of the currency, and so they were basically like today's banks, and they get the cheaper money and then they sell it at a higher price, and I think that's also something that we look down on traders, on Bitcoin traders, but they are actually the ones who also propel it into the future, because they attract the eyes and they attract the media attention, and they kind of validate it somehow. I mean, it gets validated by mining and miners on the technical side, on the blockchain side, but on the psychological side, I think you can say that traders are kind of also backing Bitcoin, and even if these are institutional traders. Good.
Yeah, well, exactly. And what happened with France, in terms of the traders actually validating the paper money in the 1700s, and this is exactly what's happening right now, is the traders who are validating the Bitcoin currency. So it's basically, I mean, we can say that Bitcoin is not tangible, it's sort of electronic, it's fake, it's not real, but people have said that about paper money before.
Of course.
And, so it's not so much of the tangibility of the item, it's basically the value we create in something. So if we take paper and create value on it, then it is valuable. So if I can take, a metal coin and create value, it is valuable, as long as somebody else is interested in it.
That's alchemy, basically. You turn lead into gold, and you turn gold into paper. I mean, lead into paper.
Yeah.
And now you turn basically emotions and eyes into Bitcoin, which is value.
And in the olden days, in fact, you had gold coins that had value and silver coins that had value. But then later on we started producing coins in terms of brass and copper and iron, which were, had a different value, but we still give value to the coins.
Yeah, but specifically with gold, I think there's no industrial use for gold. You cannot use it for anything practical. You cannot make tools out of gold and still it had value for such a long time. No, because,
that's right.
And we're not really sure why, but it's rare and it has certain aspects that Bitcoin also has. Anything else?
I think in terms of predictions about future of Bitcoin, we kind of covered with overview, but I think with the details, as soon as we start getting more subscribers, we'll start putting in more information that's more detailed. Mm-hmm. But I'm happy to kind of talk about the general trends of Bitcoin at any time,
And then we'll look, of course, into the characteristics in certain altcoins and so on. But we're just starting now, so that's the first venturing into it. And I think we have to establish a pattern out of the past years since 2009. And then, in general, Vedic astrology works really well if any astrology
is going to work.
It's going to work. So we're quite confident that this is undertaken that makes sense.
And besides, I mean, just from past history, I was able to make quite a few valid predictions in terms of looking at astrology in terms of stock market.
Yeah.
And there have been a few crashes that I've been able to predict, and right to the day. Not always successful, and that's the nature of the thing. My teacher used to say that if we can get 70% right, we're doing really well, because of there are many other factors, so.
Yeah, I mean, in business, usually if you go to the casino or even the stock market and you get more than 50% right, you're making profits. So
right.
So anything, if it's 70%, you should never trade your whole portfolio in one position. So if you spread your risk and you use astrology, you can make money, basically.
Yeah.
And I think for me personally, the validation that Bitcoin will be around 20 years is already enough information to make a lot of money.
Exactly.
Because we'll know it will not be around $10,000 for the next 20 years now.
Yeah, exactly. And then we're looking at long-term investment. I mean, if you're looking at short-term investment, obviously we're going to lose.
If we are scared.
Yeah, if you keep it for a long time and look at it as a long-term investment, it will grow.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I'd bought Bitcoin when my friend offered it to me in 2010 for like pennies then, but so.
That's why we make the subscriptions now in cryptos.
Right.
Mainly, so you get a discount probably if you pay in cryptos, and there will be a PayPal option maybe as well. And that's how we do it, newsletter.
So Klaus here is what I consider the crypto expert, and my expertise is in astrology, of course. So we'll try to blend these avenues and see how we can, get a sense of the crypto market. And hopefully you can join us and subscribe and see whether we can create a movement also in this industry.